Hello everybody, welcome back to CTO Demon channel. Today another core curriculum talk, and we begin on a topic that I'm most passionate about, reverse cart. Reverse cart was really the thing that captured me about the retrograde procedure all those years ago. I was fascinated with reverse cart. It was so cool to be able to connect the retrograde wire with the antegrade space. And very early on, I was already thinking a lot about how to improve reverse cart. Back in 2009 already, I published papers about transit balloon, about confluent balloon, about all the different methods. You can use different balloons to achieve reverse cart. And all through these years, I've been thinking a lot about reverse cart and how to make it better. Now, but I think the first talk in reverse cart has to be an analysis of the history of reverse cart. Because we've got to understand where we come from to know where we're going. Now, I was very fortunate that about 6 years ago in CCT, I watched Dr. Kato give step-by-step instruction on his original method of reverse cart to a younger operator doing a live case. And the same evening, me and Dr. Kato was having a beer and talking in detail about this technique. And so I've come to understand Dr. Kato's technique in quite a lot of detail. And again, for recording the history, I think it's important to understand this. Now, Dr. Kato's technique, I'll give you a brief description, is that when you got retrograde wire up, you got an antegrade balloon down, you inflate the antegrade balloon with the wire next to the balloon. And then you manipulate the wire until the tip of the wire is pointing towards the balloon in two perpendicular fluoroscopic views. And in that particular occasion, the operator was doing a proximal LAD CTO, and Dr. Kato keep emphasizing the importance to use spider view as one of the perpendicular views for LAD proximal reverse cart. Now, of course, in the 3D fluoroscopic video, link in description below, we've already covered which are the perpendicular views for which part of the coronary artery. So we can work that out with our imaginations. So after you point the tip towards the balloon in two perpendicular views, the second operator deflates the balloon and the first operator pushes the wire. Just push, no rotating, no turning, because if you turn, it's going to be in the wrong position. And once you push into the balloon space, you then turn the wire to wire up. That's the classical Dr. Kato side balloon entry reverse cart. I call it side balloon entry, SBE, because you're entering from the side. Now, but what we need to understand is, why did Dr. Kato come up with this side balloon entry method? Well, the reason is simple. Back in those days, in 2006 and 2007, the way we did retrograde was that we crossed the retrograde channel, and then we will try single retrograde wiring to cross the CTO body. I remember early on in CCT watching Dr. Kato using a Fielder FC wire going all the way from distal RCA to the proximal RCA, all the way through a CTO with one single wire. Now, of course, the idea back then was the retrograde is easier to wire than the antegrade. And it's true. The retrograde distal cap is usually softer than the proximal cap, and the side branches of a vessel go like this. So if you wire retrograde, you're unlikely to go down a side branch. So very often you can actually do single retrograde wiring through a reasonably long CTO if you're going through the retrograde side. But back in those days, the step one after you've crossed the retrograde channel with your balloon, we use balloons then more than microcatheters, was to try to wire with single retrograde wire crossing. Now, the wires we had then were pretty bad. Usually we're using miracle wires, okay? Those are not very controllable wires, especially when it's gone through a tortuous retrograde channel. And so wiring single wire crossing was not always successful. And often we spend a long time doing single retrograde wire crossing. Now, if single retrograde wire crossing failed, the next step was to do cart. Because very often we already have a balloon, an oval wire balloon in the distal part of the RCA or the distal LAD. So it's just a matter of blowing up that balloon in the CTO body and using the antegrade wire to puncture the retrograde balloon. Now, the reason we went to cart was because our wires were rubbish back then. and you can't control the retrograde wire because it was uncontrollable. But you can control an antegrade wire because the antegrade wire is only going through the antegrade microcatheter. It hasn't gone through all that tortuous retrograde channel. So it's easier to do CART with that set of equipment than to do reverse CART. And finally, if we fail CART, then we go to reverse CART. That was the system back in 2006, 2007, all the way to 2009. That's more or less what we did before the Corsair era. Now, the problem with this method, this stepwise method, is that usually by the time you fail retrograde single wire crossing, you've created a lot of peri-wire space in the plaque and maybe even some subintimal space that connects with the peri-wire space. So already there's a lot of damage in the plaque in the proximal, near the proximal cap. And wire control is very bad because when a wire is inside virgin plaque, okay, the first time the wire goes through plaque, the plaque is all clasping onto the wire. And you can turn the wire and the wire can track very well because it's supported by the plaque next to it. If you've been wiring for ages and you create a big space, the wire is hanging in a space. And when you poke, the wire can buckle. If there's plaque next to it, it won't buckle. If you turn, the wire can whip. So if you have a miracle wire and you're in a space that's got a lot of peri-wire space, you cannot control the wire at all. And that's why when Dr. Kato first described reverse CART, it was always using a miracle wire in a very large peri-wire space or subintimal space. It was hopeless to puncture into anything. You have to restore wire control. And you did it by inflating a big antegrade balloon. Because when you inflate a big antegrade balloon, what happens is you collapse all this peri-wire space. You push all the plaque back to the point where they grasp the wire, and you restore that substance around the wire to restore retrograde wire control. And that is why he used side balloon entry as a technique. Now, things have moved on tremendously because now we have very controllable retrograde wires, such as the Gaia Next series of wires. And we have very good retrograde microcatheters that actually allow the wire to be controlled better, even through tortuous channels. And we do not spend a lot of time trying retrograde wiring first. I mean, in the AP CTO Club algorithm, we only try retrograde wiring if the CTO is shorter than 15 millimeters, which are rare. So nowadays, we don't have a lot of peri-wire space, and we have excellent retrograde wire control. And so we should change reverse CART. No longer should we routinely do side balloon entry because it's not necessary. Wires are forward-moving devices. They penetrate best against things that are right in front of them. It's better to penetrate something in front of a wire than to penetrate something on the side of a wire. There's more penetration force and there's more control. Okay? So we should aim to wire towards the end of the balloon and not towards the side of the balloon. But there are certain conditions that is needed for us to wire towards the end of the balloon. Number one, there mustn't be too much wiring previously in that territory. Because if there's a lot of peri-wire space and we don't have retrograde wire control, it's not going to work. Secondly, the microcatheter must be able to get near to the retrograde wire tip because you want to be able to control the retrograde wire. If the retrograde wire has to go through a long space, let's say your microcatheter is stuck in the ostium of the PD and your CTO is in the distal cavity, is in the mid-RCA, okay? Then a lot of bare wire, you can't control that wire. Then, wiring towards the end of the balloon is going to be difficult. But no matter how poor your backup is or how far you are, retrograde wiring towards the end of the balloon in a virgin territory is better than wiring into the side. So if you haven't created a lot of peri-wire space, then end balloon wiring is the technique we should go for. And so this is the introduction really to the technique I developed called end balloon wiring, which we'll cover in the next video. Bye-bye.